Okay, so hello, welcome to the last lesson of the research methodology course. My name is Chang and welcome you to Unit 6 Research Report. Now, I want to ask you one question about the previous lesson. Can you list out all the chapters we learned in 5 units? So here are the answer. First one, literature review. We learned this one in Unit 2. Methodology and findings, we learned in Unit 3 and Unit 4, Unit 5. And last one, a discussion. Now let's come to the objectives of today's lesson. After this lesson, you will be able to identify the structures of a study, understand the structures of the research abstract, and also you can be able to write a complete abstract. I divide the lesson into 2 main parts. The first one is structure the report, and the last one, abstract. So about the structure of the report, actually there will be 3 main things that you need to remember. The first one is preliminary page. Next one, the main text. And the last one is the last page. So, yeah. First is preliminary page, which is the very first page. This includes title page, author's name, abstract, and keywords. So here's the example. I think you can identify all the components of the preliminary page. First, the title, common sense and persistent, EMI policy and practice in Indonesian universities. Next is the list of authors and also the school that they work for. We have the abstract and also the keywords. Now, let's come to the next part, which is the main text. We come to the first practice. I want you to guess and put the chapters or the title in the right order. So here's the answer. For all the paper, thesis, or dissertation, we always start with the introduction. Go with the literature review, research methodology, findings, discussion, and conclusion. Now, let's revise on what we have learned so far. The introduction needs to have the most 4 important things. You must include the problem statement or rationale. Rationale meaning the purpose of your report. You can actually provide a scene setting, the background, which you can review a bit of literature and current context. You should point out the gap in the literature. Second, you need to tell us about the significance of the research. Also about the aim and the objectives of the research which we have learned in Unit 1 and the scope of the research. Remember, start with the general to specific and use funneling method. Next one is literature review. Literature review is an overview of the issue. And we have learned it before. And I told you that you should divide the works into categories. For example, you can actually group them as their position or their opinion, or you can actually group them in terms of time. You can actually explain how they are similar or different. And I recommend you to write a short conclusions of the literature review, which you can actually write the best considered in the previous study's argument, the most convincing of their opinion. And remember to show that you know how to analyze all the literature and synthesize them. So we just learn about methodology also. So there are 6 parts. It will be different a bit for different papers or different theses. But normally, we will start with the research questions. The research approach, for example, is it quantitative or qualitative? Data collection tools. You can actually tell us whether you use questionnaires, interview, observation, or experimental procedure. Next is samplings. You need to specify the research population, the research sample, the sampling method, the sample size, or describe the participant or the object. Next one, tell us how you collect data. And last one, tell us how you analyze the data. Now, let's come to the things called approach. This one we learned in the very first lesson. So in here, you can see that this one is one example of the research. So they actually state that the researchers has used a mixed method approach. So that is the approach that we have learned so far. And then actually they add some theories saying about the advantages and the disadvantages of the research. Next one is example of data collection tools. So you can look at it and tell me, what are they? So actually in here, they use questionnaires and non-participant observation. Next is data analysis method, which is thematic analysis for analyzing the gained data. Thematic analysis is actually the qualitative data analysis. Last one is samples. So in this example, I show you the example of how they describe the samples. So through the text, you can know that the participants are from a language center in Vietnam, and it is preschool children at the age of 4 to 5 in 4 level. You also see the teachers who teach them through the CV. You also see the settings, which is U-shaped table and chairs, and also other things, other facilities in the classroom. Next one is finding. So for finding, you need to collect and report the data from different sources or different tools. There are 2 ways for you to organize the finding part. First, by research questions. Second, by methods. Remember to summarize all the findings and put them in logical sequence. You can put the similar data, put the similar patterns or trends. You also need to think about the systematic description of your result by writing and interpret the result. For qualitative, remember to quote and also be careful with the identities of the interviewer or the participants. Remember to relate data to your research questions. Now let's see an example. So this one is the findings from qualitative data analysis. So in here, you can see that internal motivation is a title, and all participants agreed that they intrinsically motivated in their online learning. It means that this is a main idea, the main finding. The red one is a quotation from the participant number 3, the interview. Moving on to the discussion. So remember, discussion is an overview of the main findings, as I said before. And also remember to compare and contrast your findings with the other study. And this one we have learned so deep in the Unit 5. Now let's see the example of discussion. As we analyzed before, the blue one is the main finding, followed by the comparison with the other studies, and this one we call discussion part. And as I said before also, sometimes the writer will combine findings and discussion into one paragraph. So sometimes you cannot see the separate chapter finding or chapter discussion, but they will merge into one chapter called findings and discussion. Last one is conclusion. For conclusion, you need to briefly recap the aim of your study, summarize your research finding, discuss the limitation of your study, and also make some suggestions for further research. And this one is optional. Also, this one is limitation. So why we know? Because they will phrase like in this study, there are 2 limitations worth noting. Last one is the last page, which consists of references and appendix. So references are the source material. Therefore, each reference should be listed only once in your reference section. We learned this one previously. And how about appendix? Appendix contain supplementary material that are not essential but should provide a comprehensive understanding of the research problem. So like reference, you need to follow the format rules stated by your university or stated by, like for example, APA when you're presenting your appendix. Next one, we're moving on to the abstract. For abstract, I divided into 2 main parts. The first one is elements of an abstract, and then I will tell you how you can write an abstract. So, abstract is a short paragraph that explains concisely what an investigation sets out to do. Also, they tell you about the methods, also the main conclusion reached and recommendation for action as a result of the finding. So it is usually found on the front of the research report, or if the researcher presented in a journal article, it will be in the first page. Abstract can help the reader have a clear ideas of what is in the report. So there's one trick for you when you want to do the literature review is just read the abstract and you can understand everything in the report. Now let's see a kind of very short and brief abstract. So this abstract consists of first the aim of the project by saying this project attempt to, and then they tell about the data collection tool and also the report result. However, sometimes you can see this kind of thing called a full abstract. A full abstract consists of a lot of elements that we will show you later on. For a full abstract, there will be 5 main parts that you need to be careful. First one is the purpose of the study, or you can state the research problem. Tell us about the sample, the participant, and describe them. The method approach, the data collection tools, or the data analysis method. And also summarize the result. Another very important thing is the significance of all the implications of the study. Also tell us about the limitation or further recommendation. Now let's break out the example that we just have. What is purpose of the study? It will start with the phrase, the purpose of this study was to, and plus with the verb. Sample and participant description. You should show us the sample size. For example, in here, more than 1,000 students. And then also their English level or the term that they actually register for. Next one is the method approach or the data collection tools or the data analysis method. So in here they use 5-point Likert scale. It means like questionnaire. And also a face-to-face interview. And also wrote down is the result and significance or implication of the study. Now let's move on to how to write an abstract. First, you need to remember some point. The abstract needs to be self-contained text, not an expert from your paper, which means you cannot copy the sentence and paste. Next, you need to be fully understandable on its own. It means that it need to be clear and concise. Last one, it reflects the whole structures of your lecture work. Now, let's see about the purpose of the study. So for the purpose of the study, I recommend you to write some brief context on the social or academic relevance to the topic, but do not go into the details or background. It is very recommendation that you give some meanings or definition if there are some specialized terms or terminologies. When you identify the problems, I want you to use some verbs such as investigate, test, analyze, or evaluate to describe exactly what you want to do. For the verb tense, I recommend you to use present or past simple tense. Do not use the future because the research is actually finished. So do not write, this study will, but just write, this study investigates. How to write the sample and participant description and the method approach, data collection tool, and data analysis method. In this part, I want you to be straightforward. You can only write in 2 or 3 sentences, and you should use past simple tense because it refers to the action that already complete. You should describe the sample, the sampling method, and the data collection tools. And remember to use past tense. Next one is the result. You can only include the summaries of the main research results. And this part, you can write in present or past simple tense. So, depends on the complexity and the length of the research. You cannot include all the data. Try to highlight the most significant one so that the reader can understand your research. Last one is significance or implications of the study. So if there are some limitation for your research, for example, related to the sample size or the method used, you should briefly tell in the abstract. You can also think about the further recommendation and implication. For example, if you want to solve a practical problem, you should discuss that in the last sentence of the abstract. So it comes to the end of the last unit. So for this unit, I help you to structure the report by looking at the most three important things, which is the preliminary page, the main text, and the last page. Also, we look at the abstract, the elements of the abstract, and also the steps and how to write an abstract. Thank you so much for attending the Unit 6.